All right, we've looked at the contract of purchase and sale. We've looked at financing the international transaction. We've looked at the transportation of the goods. Now we're going to look at the protection of the goods while in transit, and that's topic 12, marine insurance. Now, marine insurance covers the loss or damage to ships, cargoes, terminals, and any transportation or cargo by which the property is transferred, acquired, held between points of origin and destination. It encompasses everything, but we're only going to look at the part that really relates to trade and law, and that is cargo insurance, a subcategory of marine insurance which covers specifically the cargo. There are special cargo policies and there are open cargo policies. Special cargo policy insures the one specific shipment. So if Good Day Meat was buying one lump sum group of skis and that was it, we would never be doing business again, they would go to their insurance provider and they would get a special cargo policy. But because it's going to be a distribution agreement, at least we hope if it's negotiated, then they'll be buying skis and having them shipped, buying skis and having them shipped, buying skis and having them shipped. So they don't want to get one policy each time. Time-consuming and costly. What they do is they get an open cargo policy which will cover numerous shipments. Both special and open cargo policies cover a group of things. Damage from sea, fire, jettison, forcible taking of the ship, barattery, explosion, fumigation, and damage from loading, discharging, or transshipping of goods. Now, a couple of those terms need explanation. Jettison, I think, it seems to me we might have talked about this already, but the containers get piled so high on the ship that when they get out into the ocean and the waves begin to make the ship wallow, at some point they go too far and they turn turtle. I used to have a sailboat, and I would sail ahead of the Mosquito Creek Marina in North Vancouver, and we had to sail out under the Lionsgate Bridge. Well, we could only go out under the Lionsgate Bridge when it was slack tide. In other words, the tide wasn't coming in, the tide wasn't going out. It was momentarily stationary. Well, that's the only time we had enough power in the boat to actually maneuver. But unfortunately, the freighters had to come in and go out at that time too. And so one time we were heading out, and a freighter was coming in, and a container ship was going out. And we were right in the middle of it. And at one point, I mean, they were so close that at one point, the container ship was doing this. And we looked up and we could actually see containers above us. That was one of the most nerve-wracking moments of my life. Anyway, the idea is they get out in the ocean. Well, if it looks like the bad weather and they're going to turn turtle, they will jettison containers off the top. So that's what it means by your insurance policy covering jettison. This is so dangerous, as a matter of fact, that because these containers go in the water, there's a tremendous business of salvaging containers. Tugboats go out and find these and they tow them into port. They fill up with water, but usually they don't sink to the bottom because there's enough air trapped that they float just below the surface. This is incredibly dangerous for other ships because if they hit that, it could puncture their hull. One of the most dangerous things you could do is sail from Vancouver to Mexico or Mexico to Vancouver because there was so much shipping along the coast and so many of these containers in the water that sailboats were constantly sending out a mayday because they were sunk, hitting one of them. Okay, so that's jettison. Forcible taking of the ship is just the Somalian pirates, for example, and that is serious. Even for cruise ships, it's quite serious. The really good movie, Captain Phillips, starring Tom Hanks, talks about the forcible taking of one of the ships by some pirates. Barattery. Barattery is theft by the crew. Okay, so you have skis going all the way to Australia, and the container gets there, and gosh, somehow the seal's been broken and it's been opened, and there aren't 1,000 pairs of skis. There's 942 because all the others have been taken. Containers have reduced that kind of theft substantially, but it wasn't too long ago that a lot of the containers were not made out of metal, they were made out of wood. I had a friend when I was at high school, he got a job as a longshoreman in the summer to pay, well, this is when we were in university actually, and he had a chance to get a job as a longshoreman during the summer. He was on the dock, and one day somebody yelled, "Look out," and he jumped out of the way just as a forklift went flying by him, rammed into the side of this box container, and Rosinal skis, one of the best downhill skis available, went flying everywhere, and all of a sudden, whoosh, all the longshoremen swept in and whoosh, swept away, and they were all taking pairs of skis, and one of the longshoremen said, "Grab a pair of skis, Bob," and Bob said, "But that's stealing," and the guy took him aside and says, "Okay, you didn't see anything happen here today, if you like your knees." Seriously, okay. Not all longshoremen are like that, and containers have eliminated quite a bit of that, but there still is theft, obviously, going on. Okay, so fumigation, that's when a cargo containers are actually sometimes opened, and if they're less than a container load and there's packing in there, they'll open it up and they'll fumigate it. Could be fumigation damage to something. Few terms. One is lost or not lost clause. This stems back from the 1800s when ships were sailing ships and took months and months and sometimes years to sail around and gather up things and bring them back to England and vice versa. If you had a shipload of cotton sitting on the dock in Bombay, and you're going to have a ship bring it to England, you would go into your insurance provider in England and you would say, "I need insurance on that shipload of cotton." And if the insurance agent said, "Well, how do you know it's still there?" I mean, it could be damaged by the weather, it could be stolen, and so you, "Oh, well, okay," and you go out and you get on a ship and you go all the way to Bombay and you think, "Yep, it's okay," and then you go all the way back and you walk in and say, "I just checked, it's okay." They said, "Well, that was a month and a half ago because that's how long it took you to sail there. Is it okay now?" Well, I mean, I'm being facetious, but you can see how difficult it would be for the shipper to establish that the goods around the world are actually on the dock and everything's okay at the time he took out the insurance, which is important because you have to have an insurable interest in something to get insurance on it. So if the cotton was sitting on the dock and you got insurance today, but it turned out that 3 weeks ago it was completely destroyed or stolen, you would not be paid by your insurance company because at the time you took out the insurance, you had nothing to insure, so you had no insurable interest. Well, that would defeat the whole purpose of the insurance and make it, impossible to do. And so they put in this clause called a lost or not lost clause, which still is functional today. And I'll see COVID-19, it might be in my office at school, but I'll see if I have the Lloyd's of London policy that I used to have, because you can see the lost or not lost clause in there. What they do is they say, okay, we will insure now whether it's lost or not lost. Okay, and people could try to perpetrate frauds, but they're incredibly clever, the insurance companies. If you ever see that Farmers Insurance ad on TV where the insurance agent says, "We've seen it all," well, they've seen it all and they know what to look for, and so they're constantly catching people perpetrating frauds. So very few frauds are actually attempted. So you have this lost or not lost clause to protect you if the goods are destroyed and you don't know it and you get your insurance, you will be covered. Insurable interest means the goods, you have to have an insurable interest in the item, and you have to be careful about ownership and who you get the insurance policy in the name of. So, for example, if the bill of lading says that your company insures the cotton and you go into the insurance company and you inadvertently say, yes, I'll get the insurance, and you get the insurance in your name, well, you pay the premium, the goods are destroyed, you go to collect your insurance, and they say, but you had no insurable interest in that because you didn't own it. So you have to be careful about that. There's a very prominent Canadian case about a man who had a building, and he owned it personally, and he depreciated it basically to zero, and his accountant says, sell your building to a corporation owned by you at fair market value, and then you can start the depreciation again. Well, he sold the company the building to a company that he owned. He was the shareholder, but the insurance was in his name, not the corporation's name. And when the building was destroyed, the company said, well, you don't have an insurable interest in it because it's owned by a corporation, which is a separate legal entity, even though you are the shareholder of that corporation. Went all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada, and the Supreme Court of Canada did justice and sort of twisted the law a bit to compensate this person because he had continually paid the premiums. So they said it would be inequitable for the insurance company to have taken all the premiums and not pay out on the policy. So they said as long as he was the sole shareholder of the corporation, so in effect the building was literally his, then the insurance would have to pay. But you don't want to count on that, because if there were two or more shareholders, then that exemption no longer applies, and you would not have an insurable interest, and you would not get any insurance proceeds. Okay, fiduciary relationship. This is extremely important. We've seen this numerous times popping up. You have a fiduciary relationship as a director of a corporation, not to intercept corporate opportunities, or you have a fiduciary duty to disclose interests in contracts. We have fiduciary duties in insurance policies because you have a duty of trust and honesty. And you'd think that it was, if you have a fiduciary duty, it's generally because you have some sort of specialized knowledge. So you'd think it was the insurance company that owed you the fiduciary duty. But in fact, it's you that owes the fiduciary duty to the insurance company. I had a sailboat, as I mentioned, and there was another boat hit it and damaged my engine. And I had... and my engine mount. And I got an insurance adjuster down there, and he looked at it, and he said I didn't want to make a claim because it would be almost equal to my deductible to have it fixed. And so he was encouraging me not to make a claim. You have to remember that an insurance adjuster does not work for you, never works for you, works for the insurance company, and his job is to pay out as little amount as possible. I had never touched anything on my sailboat that didn't cost me over $100, and that was my deductible. So I said, no, I want to make a claim. The claim, or the repairs actually came to $680, so he was really trying to pull a fast one on me. So anyway, I made the claim, and the company said, well, because I had a claim, my insurance is going to go up next year. I said, but it's not my fault. Somebody else hit me. Why should my insurance go up? Because somebody else, his insurance should go up. And they said, no, that's just the way it is. And I think it was, the adjuster tried to stick it to me, but because I didn't fall for it, I think the insurance company was going to stick it to me, and they were going to make sure that I wound up paying a higher premium just to try to recoup the money that they had to pay out. Anyway, I contacted my home insurance agent and asked him if he knew anybody that did marine insurance, or because I had a sailboat. And it turned out they did, and so I then asked him for a quote, and he gave me a quote. And the premium was actually less than the premium of the other insurance company, and the coverage was wider. Now you're trying to think of what I mean by wider. A sailboat is a sailboat is a sailboat, so how could it be wider? Well, it was wider because under the one policy, I could sail up to just to Desolation Sound and down to the U.S. border. Okay, although you can't really see the dotted line in the water, but you're not supposed to go over it. Well, The new policy, the premium was less, the deductible was the same, but I could sail to the north end of Johnstone Strait, which is basically the north end of Vancouver Island, and down to the bottom of Puget Sound. So I had wider coverage. Now, I very carefully did not tell them that I had a previous claim. Because if I told them I had a previous claim, then they would charge me more too. No. I had a fiduciary duty to tell them anything that might affect the risk associated with the insurance policy. So I declared to them that I did have a previous claim, explained that it was not my fault, gave them the number so they could contact the other insurance company and confirm what I was telling them. The agent said, well, it wasn't your fault, so your insurance, is the amount we said is what we will charge you. So the other insurance company was just not a good insurance company. And there's good and bad insurance companies out there, and I learned a lesson: shop around. Okay, so had I not told them about the previous claim, and had I wound up making a claim under the new policy, they could deny paying out because I would be in breach of my fiduciary duty. Okay. So a loss or not clause, fiduciary duty, insurable interest, 3 terms you have to know. All right, 2 more terms that relate to the types of policies. One is particular average. That means the loss is borne by the owner of the damaged goods only. So you have a special cargo policy, particular average, means you're insuring your shipment and you're protecting only your shipment. And that's quite expensive. Okay. The better way of doing it would be to get a general average policy if you have numerous shipments, and open cargo policy and particular average. General average. Get that straight? I'm not sure I do. So you want to get a open cargo policy and a general average clause. What that means is if your shipment is jettisoned, rather than paying claiming against your insurance for the whole amount, which means your premium next year will increase, your risk is shared with all the other people who send it by general average, so that everybody's insurance pays a little bit, and it keeps the cost of insurance down. So you're jettisoning some cargo to save the rest. Your cargo goes in. It's not going to be as expensive for you. Conversely, if somebody else's cargo goes in, it's going to cost you a little bit of money. But you're spreading the risk amongst a larger group. All right, that's all we're going to say on insurance, how much it costs, how long it takes, who arranges it. These items will be covered by the team for Peak Performance Pontoons that does marine insurance. Okay, now there's one more chapter, and that is the chapter on intellectual property. And I'm going to go to the very last slide, which talks about the World Intellectual Property Organization, which is a specialized agency of the United Nations, which is trying to harmonize our intellectual property laws around the world. And there's 186 countries already part of the agreement. The countries that aren't are shown on the little blue map there. There's Venezuela, Bolivia, Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, Myanmar, Pakistan, and a couple of others that I can't even recognize there. Bangladesh, and one next to them. I guess that would be Afghanistan. Okay, they're not members, but the others are, including North Korea, which is a bit of a surprise. But anyway, most countries are a member of the organization. And what's that mean? Does that mean if I file a patent in Canada, then it's automatically protected amongst the 183 countries in the world? No. What they try to do is say, okay, you have to file in every country you want to be protected in. However, you can be sure that if you file, the protection will be generally the same length of time, okay, and the way you mark your products will be the same. Years ago, when the WIPO was first coming into effect and the United States wanted to be a member of it, when I say they were trying to harmonize, patents in the United States used to be for 15 years plus a 5-year renewal. Canada, they were for 20 years. Most other countries, they were for 20 years. And how it would work in the United States is after 15 years, you could go to your congressman and get your congressman to file a bill in Congress asking for a 5-year extension. Like, what could that be for? That could be for, hi, Mr. Congressman, here's a bag of money towards your next election campaign. And oh, by the way, not connected to that, of course, is the fact that I would really like a bill introduced in Congress asking for an extension of my patent. Okay? Now, that's not the way they said it was set up for, but I mean, in effect, that's what happens, right? But anyway, with the harmonization of the protection of intellectual property under the WIPO, the United States got away or eliminated this 5-year extension period, and they have now made their patents for a 20-year period. Canada also had a bit of a wrinkle, not for the same reason, but when we file an industrial design, it was for 5 years, and then you were allowed to get a 5-year extension. 10 years maximum, that's when all the protection would last, but at least you could do that. Basically, it was done because the Intellectual Property Office didn't want all these industrial designs hanging around for 10 years if they weren't being used. So after 5 years, you had to establish that you were still using it, still needed the protection. Then you could, with a nominal pay sum, which the government needs, of course, not a tax. Not a tax. Okay, no, it's not a tax. It's a user fee. You would pay the user fee to help pay their salaries. Oops, did I say that? I shouldn't have. You'd pay this user fee and then you'd get a 5-year extension. Well, most other countries in the world, industrial designs are protected for 10 years. So Canada changed their law very recently and said, okay, we'll have a 10-year period. Okay, so they're harmonizing the laws, but you still have to go country by country by country. You're a little you get a benefit filing in the EU because they have a centralized office now. You don't have to file in Portugal, Spain, Italy, France, Germany, the Netherlands, and so on. So you can just file once under the United Nations, which is kind of good. All right, but and what they're trying to do is get countries to honor intellectual property, which is a bit of a argumentative subject between China and the United States. China was very, very aggressive at taking patentable technology from the United States and copying it and not protecting other intellectual property rights. For example, Starbucks ran into that. They began opening up corner coffee shops in China. And as a matter of fact, it was such a huge market that they thought they would open up a store a day for 100 years. And it would have been just phenomenal, except one of the problems was they opened up their shop, it's very, there's the green and black and that little, mermaid thing. And right across the street, there was a Chinese business, partly owned by the government, that opened up a coffee shop with the green and black and almost identical. And and there was a big fight over that. And it went to court, and I can't remember, I think the court said no infringement of trademark. Okay, and it only got resolved when a Chinese multinational firm operating in the United States had somebody copy their design and they took them to court in the United States, and the court in the United States said, "Comity, we'll treat you the way you treat us." So things are getting a little bit better. All right, now that's I wanted to talk about that because the rest of the video, I have to explain, was not done for this course. It was done for BADM 107. But intellectual property laws in Canada are the ones that then have to be enforced everyone else in the world. And basically, the protection in the rest of the world is the protection that you get in Canada. So that is very applicable to this course. And so you're going to get that video. So when it starts off, and I think I say, hey, BADM 107, section 76 students or something, forget that, okay? But the content's the same, and it's the same as on my screens, which I will not go through because I go through them again on the in that video. One other point I want to make, and that is I talked about public domain in the video, which means if you have a patent, you can file a patent and get a patent if there's novelty, utility, and ingenuity. Okay, ingenuity, there's a genius element in the creation of it. Novel means there's nothing else out like there, and it has usefulness. Well, the not anything else like it out there could be a problem when people create an invention and they go to some operator to get a prototype made, and that's like exposing it to the public, and then they may do a test market, and suddenly they realize, oh, I've got to file a patent, and but now it's out in the public domain, and it's called prior art, and I don't refer to that in the BADM 107 video, so I'm referring to it here, prior art. Well, prior art means it's no longer novel, and it becomes obvious. And if it's no longer novel and it's obvious, then you cannot get a patent on it. So what happens is in Canada, the United States, and the European community, you have a 1-year grace period. Now the textbook has a really good section on the WIPO, well, on intellectual property, pardon me. It talks about the World Trade Organization Treaty on Intellectual Property Protection, the TIPS agreement, and TIPS now works with the WIPO, so we don't bother covering it. But it covers it very well, which should be a hint to the group that's doing the intellectual property investigation. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much.